We are here because I have two things going on in my life at the moment. I have impatience and I have gratitude. So I'm going to open today by talking to you about my impatience. Anyone who knows a scorer of any stripe knows that impatience is what we do. So those of you who work with my brother know we're very good at it. But I'm not talking about my passive-aggressive saying excuse me to tourists on the escalator. I'm talking about a much more existential impatience. Let me do a little test for you. Who knows who Ruby Bridges is, born 4 days after me? Anyone know who Ruby Bridges is? Okay, right. Well, in 1960, when we were both 6 years old, Ruby Bridges, who was born several thousand miles away from me, was the first black girl to be bused to a white school. And there are photographs all over the place of little Ruby being bused to a white school when she was 6 years old. No white girls were ever bused to black schools. And I think this is a very important point that I want to make today. That we are training the next generation to be more like the existing system. We are not learning from the others, the ones on the outside, and that's really what I want us to do today, is to start learning from the ones on the outside. There's a few more dates on here that I'm going to be your aggressive history teacher and test you on. No, I won't be. 1965 saw the Race Relations Act in the UK. The Race Relations Act said that it was no longer legal to discriminate on the basis of race, colour or creed. Now, I was already 11 years old. And imagine, if you will, little Kay getting on the bus with Granny Scorer. In the days when black people had to sit upstairs on a double-decker bus. They were not allowed to sit downstairs. This is in my lifetime. And black people were not allowed to drive the bus. They could be the conductor, but they couldn't be the driver. And Granny Scorer, who was quite fierce, if she saw a black person getting onto the bus, would take hold of them firmly and sit them down next to her downstairs on the bus. I would like to channel a bit more Granny Scorer from now on. So 1965, Race Relations Act. Let's move on through the years a little bit. Decriminalisation of homosexuality, 1967. Homosexuality was decriminalised, but the age of consent was 21, whereas the age of consent for us straight people then was 18, we're now 16. It was as if they were saying, gay people, can you just think about it for another 3 years? So patronising. What else happened in 1970 refers to note. Disability Discrimination Act. Weren't allowed to discriminate against people based on their ability. 1975, Sex Discrimination Act. When I opened my first bank account at the age of 16, the forms that I had to fill out to open my bank account had to be signed by my father. It was not permissible to have those forms signed by my mother. I know, you're going, what the? Yeah. So they had to be signed by my father. If you know our family, you know how ridiculous that is, because my mother always looks after the money, and my father was actually hopeless. But anyway, they had to be signed by Daddy. When I went to get my first mortgage, all the banks were advertising 3 times the salary you could borrow for your mortgage, a bit less than today. I went to the bank and said, right, I've got this salary, I've got this flat, and he said, we don't give girls 3 times their salary. We give girls 2.5 times. Because, darling, you won't be working for much longer, will you? I tell you what, I hope he's dead. I'm here, I'm 65, I'm still working. Other examples. Oh yeah, my first degree choice was going to be chemical engineering. I actually did biochemistry in the end. When I started to apply for a degree in chemical engineering, I was told that women had to get higher grades than men in order to study chemical engineering. Yeah, in our lifetime, right? So, moving on through the years. Age of consent for homosexuals was equalised in 2001, not very long ago really, is it? And Gender Recognition Act, which said you can actually call yourself what you want to be called, you can claim the gender you want to claim. That didn't happen until 2004. So, yes, I'm impatient because all of these laws have been passed, but there has not been enough change. The gender pay gap in this country, the gap between what men, the mean earnings of men and the mean earnings of women, is 19%. Okay, we've made progress, but 19% is quite big. Now, I know why this is, because the gender weight gap is 23%. Men on average weigh 23% more than women, so we're clearly being paid by pound. So girls, I just suggest that you eat more donuts and you will get equal pay. But, you know, I'm jesting, obviously. But 19% is still quite a big gap. And we all know that this is largely because the jobs that women tend to do are valued less. So it's less valuable to be a nurse looking after old people than it is to be a banker. The gender pay gap in those influential industries like the media and banking is shocking. The gender pay gap at HSBC Bank last year was 61%. At Barclays it was 48%. So pitifully slow progress. Hello, Alma's love. Just pass everyone a round of applause. So, very, very slow progress. In the media, and we've already heard lots of stuff about the BBC gender pay gap today, The Economist and Dow Jones have huge gender pay gaps of about 40%. So we're not quite there yet. Let's move on to ethnicity and pay gaps. BAME. It's such a lovely big box to tick, isn't it? Black, Asian, minority, ethnic. I had a delightful moment recently when I walked in to teach on a leadership course that I've been teaching on for 6 years. And it's always been 90% white males. I walked in and the room was full of all different colours, genders. I was so moved I almost cried. Until I asked them all where they'd been to university. And every single one of them had been to Oxbridge, or Yale, or Harvard, or one of the C4s in China. What kind of diversity is that when everyone in the room has the same education? And there's a writer whose name I can't pronounce, Derekovich, who refers to excellent sheep. That we are breeding leaders of excellent sheep. They're really, really good at doing what we've always done. So, some progress, but mainly excellent sheep. Within the BAME category, if we look at the data, and by the way, if anybody wants the data on this, because I'm me, I have it all, so I will send it to you later, just write to me. Who do you think the highest earning ethnic group in this country is? Absolutely, Asian. So Chinese and Indian, in fact, are the two highest earning ethnic groups, followed by white British. Way, way below that comes people of black African, black British descent, and at the very bottom is Bangladeshi. So within BAME, we have some people who are earning above average, but we have some people who are earning way below. And one of my pleas to you in the corporate world is don't make BAME one box. Make sure that you split it out so that you know what progress you're making. I want to read you a quote actually from William Derekovich, whatever his name is. He's even more cutting than I am. He says, a lack of curiosity, of interesting rebellion, of moral courage, of passionate weirdness. I'm looking at Steve Chapman when I say passionate weirdness, because that's what he's all about. We have spawned a generation of polite, striving, praise-addicted, grade-grubbing non-entities. He doesn't sugar anything, I see. And the point I'd like to go on to make here is, we've talked about gender and we've talked about ethnicity. We do not honour different types of intelligence. There is no neurodiversity measure. We are not measuring how many people who are dyslexic or autistic and so on get to places of influence. And I know that some of you in the audience here are yourselves dyslexic and you've had to work very hard to get where you are. Something that I find quite amusing is that even to do an art A-level, you have to write the paper. You cannot paint your exam, you've got to go to words. What kind of diversity is it when everyone has to express themselves the same way? It is worth. So I would say that we're still practicing what I would call intellectual colonialism. You can come to the top, you people of colour, you people of difference, so long as you are intellectually the same as everyone else. And here comes your nightmare moment, because I am going to ask you in a moment to co-create something at your tables without using words. Just one final point is, in spite of all this diversity legislation, we are not achieving wealth equality either. So even though we have made some progress in diversity, the wealth gap between the richest and the poorest all over the world is increasing. And this, I don't think, can be right. So in spite of more equality, there is less wealth equality. There's a thing called the Gini coefficient, I won't go into it. Anyone who likes numbers can come and talk to me later. The UK is the 5th worst for equality in the OECD countries, the 4th worst in Europe. Very soon we won't be the 4th worst in Europe, we'll just be the worst in GB. There you go. Mustn't get political, Kay, there's an election coming up. So, to close, I'd like to say I think we're slightly missing the point with diversity. That we need to open up our minds to different experiences, different neurodiversity, people who have had very different lives.